in the fellowship room where we have our group that is mask only. And I've looked online, and we have people watching from Texas. We have people worshiping from Oklahoma. We have people even worshiping with us in Indiana. And who knows where else people are tuning in from. But wherever you are, we are so thankful that you've chosen to worship with us this morning. Today we conclude our lessons on transformed, becoming what God meant for us to be. Tonight, I hope that you will be back. Sam is going to preach to us tonight and give us a lesson from God's Word. I always look forward to the nights that Sam preaches. He does an outstanding job in presenting God's Word to us and making it very applicable. Let me ask you a question. What would have happened if Noah had completed 90% of the ark? Imagine, after years and years of brutal manual labor, hard labor, finding these the wood and cutting it and measuring and cutting it to the right lengths and make sure it's fastened together and doing all this. And Noah and his sons, they were coming down to the end, and Noah said, "Hey sons, guys, this is good enough. We're close. I'm convinced this thing is going to float. We're going to get through this. I know that we haven't, finished the trim work and, put the final touches on it, but trust me, this thing is going to float. We've done almost everything God has asked us to do." What do you think would have happened? Let's look at Genesis 6, verses 18 through 22. Let's start at verse 17. God says, "For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall die." And then God says a key word that I know Noah loved to hear. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing of all flesh you shall bring two of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Of the birds according to their kinds, and the animals according to their kinds, of every creeping thing on the ground according to its kind, two of every sort shall come to you to keep them alive. Also take with you every sort of food that is eaten and store it up. It shall serve as food for you and for them. Verse 22, Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. Noah could not afford to make a partial commitment. Thankfully, Noah was faithful. He was faithfully committed to God's promises, and through Noah, God spared humanity. That is, through the 8 that entered into the ark. A covenant is an oath-bound relationship, putting it simply, between two parties that have agreed upon conditions. As an example of a human covenant that most of us have made and probably will make is one of marriage. A husband and wife, a man and woman, they decide that they are going to go in and enter into a relationship. And they make an oath together. It's a covenant. And both of them make certain promises, and they say, we will be faithful to that. As a husband, I will be committed to you as my wife. As a wife, I will be committed to you as my husband. And they enter into that agreement. A divine covenant is very similar to that of a human covenant. A divine covenant, in other words, it's an agreement made between God and man. Works very similar, except God establishes the terms and not man. And throughout the Bible, God relates to humanity through these agreements or through these covenants that He makes with them. He sets forth the stipulations, and humans, if they decide they want to enter into that covenant, they realize, hey, this is on me. And that if I do this, God is faithful. And so we see that throughout. God makes promises. and in exchange asked man to make and fulfill certain commitments. He made a covenant with Adam. We see here he made a covenant with Noah. God made a covenant with Abraham. God made a covenant with the kings of Israel. God made a covenant with King David. And there are several others that God has made covenants with. Now, through Jesus, God has made or enters into a covenant relationship with individuals who put their faith in the finished work of Jesus Christ to save them. It is referred to in Scripture as the New Covenant. It's prophesied by Jeremiah in Jeremiah 31. It's the new covenant, the better covenant that the Hebrew writer talks about in Hebrews chapter 8, established through Jesus. And in this covenant, God renews humanity. He transforms them, as we have been discussing through faith, and promises to give them the very best of heaven that heaven has to offer. In exchange, we make two commitments. If we want to enter into this covenant with God through Jesus, we make two commitments. And they are to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. Those two are really inseparable. You show one by displaying the other. How do people know that we love God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength? Well, we love our neighbor as ourselves. That's how we fulfill those. Now, most of you, I would assume, not all of you, most of you have made a commitment to God. You entered into a covenant with Him by putting your faith in Jesus Christ. You made a covenant. You agreed that I want to follow Jesus, and I'm going to do so, and Jesus is going to save me, and I'm going to show my gratitude to that by loving God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loving my neighbor as myself. You made a commitment. And you know, just as being a member of the human race, that commitment oftentimes can be very difficult. It's very hard to make commitments and to see them to fruition or to continue in them. It's very hard, but we are asked to make commitments every single day. Every day. We're asked to commit to our spouses. Every day you commit to them. If you have children, you have made commitments to your children, and you're asked to keep those commitments every day. If you have a job, you have made a commitment, and you work every day to keep that commitment with your employer. Many people, especially in the first of the year, they make commitments to an exercise program or to diets or to do this or to get rid of this habit. I'm going to do away with this bad habit and pick up these good habits. And countless other things that we commit to. Now, sometimes those commitments don't last very long. Maybe a day, a week. Some of them, we make a commitment and they last a lifetime till death do us part, right? And we live in that commitment for the rest of our lives. We sometimes, these commitments, we find out that there's a fine balance to keep these commitments. I've got to look at my life and structure it in such a way that I'm able to keep these commitments that I make. You know, I want to keep the commitment that I've made to my wife. I don't want to let other things get in the way. So I've got to finally balance some things in my life so I'm able to give her or fulfill the promises that I've made to her. I've made commitments to my children, and so I've got to look at my life and delicately balance some things so that I'm able to fulfill that commitment as a father. We have sometimes to take time and effort from one commitment that we make and often give it to another commitment that we've made, vice versa. Sometimes we've got to look at these commitments and say, hey, this commitment is a lot more important than this commitment that I've made. The commitment that I've made to my wife is a lot more important than the commitment I've made maybe to an exercise program or a diet that I'm going to try to work on. You know, if something happens, I'm going to be like, yeah, my commitment to my wife, that's going to be more important than making sure I eat, a green salad for dinner at night for the next however many weeks. I've got to realize that. And so I've got to, shuffle some things and make some priority adjustments so that I'm able to keep the commitments that are way more important than maybe of some more trivial that I make or try to keep. And while this works with some commitments, it does not work with the commitment that we made to follow Jesus. Luke chapter 9, and he said to all, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. For what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses or forfeits himself or his own soul," some translations say. "For whoever is ashamed of me and my words, of him the Son of Man," referring to himself, "will be ashamed when he comes in all his glory and the glory of the Father and of the holy angels." Question, and I've alluded to this, I think, a couple weeks ago. Why do we use earthly things, school, sports, jobs, and a handful of other things, to teach life lessons about commitment? But we don't use the commitment that we made to Jesus, that I will love you with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength. And I will show that by loving my neighbor as myself. Why don't we use that commitment to teach what it really means to keep a commitment? Why is it that God understands, and understand I'm being sarcastic when I say this, why is it that God understands when we have to give less time and energy to Him in order to fulfill another commitment that we've made? If you're a child of God, through faith in Jesus Christ, you entered into a covenant relationship with God, and you made a commitment to Jesus. A commitment that you should know, maybe you don't, but you should have understood that when you made it, that it is the commitment of all commitments. It is the commitment that you will keep no matter what, even if it means that you have to fail in keeping other commitments and give those commitments up, because I'm a child of God. Jesus died for me, and I have surrendered my life to Him, and I will show my faith to any and everyone by loving Him with all of my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loving my neighbor as myself. And I'm not ashamed of that, and I'm not ashamed to let anybody, the whole world, see that, if need be. Because I think it's the most important commitment. And I want other people to make that commitment as well. Through your immersion into Christ, you died to self, and God raised you up a new life, alive with Christ. Ephesians 2 and verse 5, having forgiven you all your sins, Colossians 2 and verse 13, seated you in the heavenly places with Christ, Ephesians 2 and verse 6, and has adopted you as His Son, Galatians chapter 4 in verse 5. And through this divine process, God has recreated you. Or as we have looked these several weeks, has transformed you into His holy child. And God doesn't expect you to be perfect, thankfully. He knows that you can't. That's why He has perfected you in Jesus Christ. But the Christian life is a process of letting go of old habits, maybe letting go, can we say, of commitments that keep me from keeping the greater commitment that I've made to Jesus and embracing my new life in Him. And we won't always get it right, understand that. But we've promised to keep moving forward. We've promised to persevere and remain faithful in our commitment to God. And as we read just a few minutes ago, whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Jesus says our commitment to Him must supersede all other commitments that I have made. The covenant that I've made with God through Jesus Christ supersedes any other covenant that I've made with anybody else. It's greater than a handshake that I've made with someone. It's greater than a promise that I've made to someone else. It's greater than the commitment that I've made with my employer. It's greater than those things. You know what? It's even greater than the commitment that I've made to my spouse. Heaven forbid my wife ever came to me and said, it's me or Jesus. I better say Jesus. It would be tough, but I better say Jesus. It would break my heart if it ever came to that. But He's the one that saved me, not her. And it supersedes everything. He doesn't ask for perfection, He asks for my heart. He asks for me to love Him more than anything else in the world. And as Christians, we are called to press on to the best, to be the best that we can after realizing and acknowledging our complete dependence on Him and His sacrifice. There can be no partial commitment when it comes to this decisions. Our loyalties cannot be divided. Either we are in or we are out. It's one or the other. Matthew chapter 6 and verse 24. With that in mind, I'm going to look at the rest of the time that we have of 3 marks of a person that is committed to transformation. 3 marks of a person who has made a covenant with Jesus or with God through Christ and says, I'm committed to this with my whole heart. And I've surrendered myself and I'm going to allow the Spirit of God to transform me to be who God wants me to be. Number 1, an unending preoccupation with the glory of God. The very purpose that you and I were created was to bring glory to God. So it's right that the first mark of a person committed to transformation is focused, has their attention focused on the glory of God. Since the moment Adam and Eve ate of the forbidden fruit, man has been preoccupied with self. With self. It's natural. It's just what we do. We think of ourselves before any and everybody else. That's exactly why Paul says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, Romans chapter 3 and verse 23. But a child of God isn't focused on self, on the glory of self. He is focused on the glory of God. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. Do you see how important that is? He doesn't say, I mean, you could say this, but he doesn't say this. He doesn't say whether you are loving your wife or your children, or whether you are fulfilling your responsibilities to your employer, do the glory of God. He makes it so simple, even the mundane things in life. As you chew your food and swallow your iced tea, what does he say? Do it to the glory of God. That's a gift. Those things are a gift from God, and I'm going to do it in such a way that God is on my mind when I do things, even the mundane things. God should be on my mind, and I should be in awe of that. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who's in heaven, Matthew 5 and verse 16. So what does it mean to be preoccupied with the glory of God? The Greek word for glory is doxa, D-O-X-A, which literally means what evokes good opinion. Sounds kind of strange, but it corresponds to the Old Testament word that means heavy or something with great weight. It's the idea is one of great worth or immense intrinsic value. The glory of God refers to all that He is. All of His attributes, all of His greatness is probably the most difficult thing to explain about God. But it has to do with His great, immense, intrinsic beauty and value. And we are to be preoccupied with that. So being fascinated and absorbed by the glory of God means my life's mission is to make the unimaginable greatness and beauty of God look so unimaginably beautiful and great to all people. And it starts with living a transformed life. The psalmist, Psalm 34 and verse 3, "Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt His name together." Is your life being lived in such a way that people see how great and how good God is? Now, I know that we can't really live to the fullest potential of that. I understand that. But is your life being lived in such a way that people see there's something different about it? We must be committed to making God look as great, awesome, and beautiful as He really is. How? Well, 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 31 says, "So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God." Everything that I do, if I am living in such a way that I am preoccupied with the glory of God, everything that I do, I have God on my mind. An unending preoccupation with the glory of God. Another mark, an unfailing love for the children of God. Not only should I be consumed by the glory of God, but I must be filled with His love. The Bible tells us that the love of God is a distinguishing mark of a Christian. By all this, Jesus says, by this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have what? Love for one another. John 13 and verse 35. People will know that I love Jesus, that I love God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength because I love people as myself. For this is the message that you have heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. 1 John 3 and verse 11. As souls ransomed and transformed by the blood of Jesus, we have the Spirit of God within us, who has blessed us with the God-given capacity to love others as myself. Look at 1 Corinthians 13. We have been conditioned that somebody says 1 Corinthians 13, we immediately think of what? The love chapter, right? And a lot of times this is read at weddings and things of that nature about a love between a husband and a wife. But have you ever realized the context in which Paul writes this? This is written in the context of brotherly love, of how members of God's body treat one another, not husband and wife, but the members of God's body. And he says, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and I have all faith so as to remove mountains but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all that I have, if I deliver up my body to be burned but have not love, I gain nothing. In other words, I can do everything right towards my brothers and sisters in Christ, but if I don't do it because I love them, it doesn't do me any good. He's talking about how we treat one another. And then he goes in and says, love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Keep in mind, this is how we treat one another. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, we prophesy in part, but when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned as a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. So now faith, hope, and love abide, but the greatest of these is love. How do I love? How are you supposed to love? We're to love as Jesus loves. Jesus' love is selfless. It's sacrificial. It's indiscriminate. It's understanding. It's enduring. It's forgiving. And unless I love like that, I'm not fulfilling the new commandment to love as Jesus loves. Love one another as you love yourself. When we love God the most, we will have an unfailing love for others. Number 3, the third mark of a person committed to transformation is an unwavering loyalty to the Son of God. Discipleship, following Jesus, it goes far beyond a promised loyalty. It's more than making a vow, which we do frequently and rashly sometimes, and then failing to follow through. Discipleship demands practiced loyalty. We talked about that this morning. Faith does what? It acts. It does things. It's what faith does. Love does things. We said this morning, if all we did was we just told people that we love them, but never did anything about it, what would they think? I'm not sure if Sean loves me as much as he says he does, because he never does anything to back that up or show that. Discipleship demands practiced loyalty, a functioning loyalty that holds up under pressure. You know, we make a covenant marriage for better or for worse. We might could say under pressure, when things aren't really what we want them to be at the time. Jesus must have our hearts. We must love Him supremely. Any one of you who does not renounce all that He has, Jesus says, cannot be my disciple. Luke 14 and verse 33. If you're not willing to give things up, He says, you cannot follow me. You might say that you are, but your actions say differently. Matthew 6, verse 24. No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. Hebrews 10 and verse 23. We are able to possess and live out an unwavering loyalty to Jesus because He is faithful to us. 3 marks of a person committed to transformation. Someone who has committed their life to Christ, an unending preoccupation with the glory of God. God is always on my mind, and everything that I'm doing, I'm going to do to His glory. I'm going to do it with Him in mind. I'm going to be thinking about, as I do this, is this the way Jesus would have done this? An unfailing love for the children of God. When I make a commitment to Jesus, guess who else I make a commitment to? His church, His people. I can't make a commitment to Jesus without making a commitment to His people. And so if I'm not living out the commitment that I've made to God's people, I can't be living out the commitment that I've made to God. And then number 3, an unwavering loyalty to the Son of God. It goes far beyond profession. It goes to the end of the world. And that I'm faithful and loyal even under pressure. Even when things aren't going my way. Even when things aren't really happening and panning out the way that I wanted them to. We'll end with the question. A couple. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, to clarify that. I don't want you to get a false sense of hope here. On a scale from 1 to 10, where is your commitment to Jesus? And why did you pick that number? Who or what has the most influence on your day-to-day decisions? And where does Jesus fall in the order of the influential voices in your day? What step do you need to take this week to make your relationship with Jesus your number one priority? As children of God, and as we end this series of lessons on transformation, we need to remember we made a commitment. When you decided to die to self, and you were buried, you were immersed into Jesus Christ for the remission of your sins, you entered into a covenant with God, and you made a promise to Him. I will love you with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, no matter what. And I will show that. I will show the love that I have for you, because I will love people made in your image as myself, no matter what. That's the commitment that you've made, that we've made collectively, even as a church, if you are a child of God. God has been faithful to you. Are you being faithful to Him? This morning, if you need to respond to the Lord's invitation for whatever reason, please come forward while we stand and while we sing.
Have my affections been nailed to the cross? Is thy heart right with God? Dost thou count all things for Jesus but loss? Is thy heart right with God? Is thy heart right with God? Washed in the crimson flood, cleansed and made holy, humble and lowly, right in the sight of God. All life under Jesus' control, is thy heart right with God? Does each moment abide in thy soul? Is thy heart right with God? Is thy heart right with God? Washed in the crimson flood, cleansed and made holy, humble and lowly, right in the sight of God.
Seated.